So she called me into a meeting and she said, "Jo, I'm really sorry, but you're about to lose everything." The key thing was to finish my education. And I think that's why it was so hard for them when I was then pregnant, when I was 16. It was not planned consciously, but I would say that I was definitely struggling at that time with my mental health, just by virtue of the fact that I was a teenager and full of hormones. And of course, when I then became pregnant, there was absolutely no doubt in my mind ever that I would be keeping my baby. The ability to form relationships and solve problems, the ability to collaborate. There are so many skills that are so much more valuable in the world today than just having a piece of paper that says you're clever. So I've been a parent my entire adult life. I was pregnant before I left home, and I've always had to combine work with family. Yeah, so when I was 18, my son's dad killed himself. No, he took his own life. He gassed himself in my car. But from that moment onwards, I realised that people and relationships and being happy is so much more important than working hard and doing well. So fast forward to 2018, that was actually the year that I was homeschooling the kids. Unfortunately, that was also the year that my marriage broke down. But saying no meant losing everything, and saying yes meant maybe saving everything. So I said yes. And I took, actually, in a relatively short period of time, the business was thriving. You know, it was doing well, it was making a good profit, and we were climbing our way out of that big black hole that we'd been in.
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. Through sharing the stories of our guests, I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors, Nostos, an authentic experience of Greece right here in the heart of Hove. In a world brimming with dining options, finding that one place that captivates your palate and heart isn't always easy. It's about more than food. It's the stories, the ambience, the slice of another world. This is the essence of Nostos, an award-winning Greek restaurant. With traditional recipes passed down through generations, each dish promises a story and a piece of heritage. And Nostos is more than just a restaurant, it's a community contributor. Each dining experience supports initiatives close to their heart, from local charities to cultural events enriching Brighton and Hove's social fabric. They also provide catering services, bringing Greek cuisine to your personal events. For a taste of Greece without leaving town, visit nostos-hove.co.uk. And when you do go, say Sam recommended the feta nests. Oh my God, they are amazing. Okay, welcome to another episode of the podcast. My guest this week is a former solicitor who in 2018 took over Bagelman after returning it to profitability and steering it through the pandemic. She has now handed over the reins to her son Leon and resumed her career in HR and employment law. I was lucky enough to hear her speak at the Best of British event, and her story inspired me so much. I've been so excited to have her on as a guest and share her story with us today. I'm delighted to welcome the wonderful Jo Pryor to the podcast. Jo, how are you?
I am very well, Sam. Thank you for having me. It's a great honour.
It's amazing. Look, it's really strange. We're obviously just chatting prior to coming on air and sort of saying about, I remember hearing you speak and talk really openly and honestly about your journey and some of the challenges that you sort of faced on the way and stuff. So I'm really, really excited to share with our listeners today. So look, we're gonna jump straight in as we always do, and we're gonna kick things off obviously at the beginning of your story, because I believe that there's a start to a story, and I want to go back to the beginning. So do our life in 60 seconds and just tell us a little bit about something about your life growing up to sort of help shape who sits in front of me today.
I grew up in Brighton, which I understand is quite unusual. Had a really lovely childhood, lived with my brother and my parents. They both worked for the NHS and worked their whole lives for the NHS. But they just created a really beautiful home for me and my brother to grow up in. Lots of lovely holidays. We went to good schools, surrounded by friends, and family and culture, and we just had a really, really lovely time. My mum worked hard. She was always working, whether she was working as a nurse or a health visitor or in the home with me and my brother looking after us. And my dad just has the most incredible mind. He's a big thinker, a doctor, but also a philosopher and a scientist. So we had some really fantastic conversations in the home around the dinner table. So a good childhood. I was very, very lucky.
Amazing. Right. And let's talk a little bit more about it. And so, growing up with parents like that, and what was it like? What was you like at school? What was your school life like? Did you get on well at school? You enjoy it? Or
I think I was well behaved until I was a teenager. I was a rebellious teenager. My brother would say very rebellious. I think it was healthy, a healthy rebellion. But I did well at school. Yeah. You know, I was a good girl and I was clever and I did my homework and I worked hard. And actually, I think that came from my parents. One of the values they gave me was a appreciation for education and learning and broadening your mind. And even when I was going through my naughty phase, I always went to school. Okay. I never skipped a beat, so yeah.
And what was like? What did you have in mind? What you wanted to do when you was younger? What career you wanted to go into, or was there a path, a focus?
No, I didn't have a clue. I was an all-rounder. My brother took after my dad. He was a scientist. But I was just quite good at everything, but not brilliant at anything, which I think makes it really difficult for young people growing up. If you don't have a passion and you're just quite good at everything, it can be quite hard to know where to go with that, really. I've always really, I'm quite a nurturing person, and I think I get that from my mum. So I always thought that I would end up in a caring profession. But again, as I said, because I was quite rebellious, it definitely was not going to be medicine, because that's what my dad did and what my parents did. So
did they want you to maybe go? Was there an encouragement to go into that, or?
No, not especially. They definitely wanted me to go to university. There was no doubt about that. But there was no pressure to go in any particular direction. The key thing was to finish my education. And I think that's why it was so hard for them when I was then pregnant, when I was 16, because that was not obviously what they had planned for me or had hoped that I would end up doing.
What was that like then? Talk to me about that at 16. Not planned, I'm assuming, at 16, or what?
It was not planned consciously, but I would say that I was definitely struggling at that time with my mental health, just by virtue of the fact that I was a teenager and full of hormones. And I think that on some level, I definitely thought that having a baby and having another person to take care of and to love would help me feel better. So I was careless. At the time, of course, I said it was completely accidental, because who plans to have a baby when they're 16? But I was definitely careless with contraception. And of course, when I then became pregnant, there was absolutely no doubt in my mind ever that I would be keeping my baby and moving out of home and starting a new life with my boyfriend at that time. So that was a very abrupt end to a very idyllic childhood. And yeah, quite a major change in direction for me.
And then what at 16, I guess, going back to that point, and then being a young mother, and what future plans? What did you think of them? Was it then thinking about, well, I'm going to be a mother now and that's going to be it, or are you going to go on and career-wise? What was sort of going through your head, I guess?
I didn't have a plan for a career, but I definitely had a plan to finish my education, and that was never in doubt. So I was pregnant by the September that I started my A-levels. By that time I'd left school and I was at sixth form college in Brighton. And there was never any doubt in my mind that I would not finish my A-levels and go to university.
Wow.
So I continued at sixth form college all the way through the first year. Leon was very conveniently born at the end of June. So,
timing.
Perfect timing. So I think I only missed 2 weeks of the summer term. Had the summer off with him, obviously. It was the summer holidays, and on the 1st of September I was back in college with my baby, ready to start work again. And I never asked if I could bring him in. I just turned up with my pram, parked it in the corner of the classroom, and carried on with my studies, which was, all power to my tutors and to the principal of the college at that time for just letting me do that, because that was really good.
What was the feeling, I guess, from other students and your peers at that time? What was that period like, being a mother and then studying?
The other students were just brilliant, supportive. My history tutor once said to me that, the lessons I was in were his favourite because everyone was so well behaved. I'd sit there as a 17-year-old breastfeeding in front of 17-year-old boys, and they were so well behaved they couldn't possibly look at me, so they really concentrated on what he was saying. But yeah, everyone was great. I think for me personally it was hard because suddenly there was no shared experience with my peer group. I was going through something very, very different. I had a huge amount of responsibility. Parenthood is huge, whatever age you are. And I was missing out on parties because I was at home with my baby. But it was right for me at that time.
What is it about you to have that focus still at that young age and be in the position you're in, which is not like a lot of the other 16-year-olds, as you've alluded to, but to have that focus to still go, no, I need to get my education, and this is the utmost importance, as well as being able to look after a child as well. Just where's that skill, that mindset come from?
That came from somewhere deep inside me, and I can't necessarily identify where from. I think that I was quite frightened about what my future was going to be, and it was a huge wake-up call, parenthood, a big reality check. And I felt that if I worked hard and did well, if I did my A-levels and went to university, then our shared future would be a good one and would be a positive one. And that's because of my background and because of the value that my parents placed on education. I felt that was, my ticket to success in the future.
Yeah, wow. And then talk about university after what happened then, obviously, still as a young parent, and as Leon's obviously growing up and those early years, but then and university, was that a struggle? Did you enjoy university? What?
University was much easier than A-levels.
Yeah.
A-levels were really hard. I mean, pregnancy and a newborn made that incredibly hard, and obviously I was a bit younger. University, I had a great time. I really enjoyed it. I had opportunities to move away to university, and in the end decided to stay locally and go to Sussex. And I did anthropology with development studies, which I loved. It was brilliant and interesting, but not much of a career at the end. And then I did the law conversion course. So I did a postgraduate diploma in law after my undergraduate degree.
And was that with that the plan? Oh, I'm going to go into law, and that was going to as a profession?
No, I didn't know what I was going to do. I finished university with this degree in anthropology and really thought, oh, okay. My parents had kind of promised me, as had many parents of that generation, if you go to university, then you'll have a job for life. And I went to university and I had a degree, and I didn't have a clue what job I was going to do or if it would be for life. And I think really for my generation that had all changed. You know, society had changed a lot from when they had obviously done their studies. So I thought for a while that maybe I would go into teaching. I wanted to stay in Brighton, and that time there wasn't a great deal of industry in Brighton, so it needed to be a profession. It definitely wasn't going to be medicine, and that really left me with law. Yeah. So it was never at that time a passion, but it was a sensible choice. Yeah. So
what I'm interested in, because obviously with the education system and the way that it is, I talk about it on here quite a lot, but what's your position around it now? Because you obviously, your parents put a really, you know, an emphasis on how important that was to do that. But then, similar as you're sort of saying, you come out of education with a degree potentially, and actually still not know what direction you want to go in. What's your take on the education system, the way it's set up now, and are you still with your kids? Was that essential for them to go ever?
I don't think it is essential anymore. No, not at all. In fact, when Leon was doing his A-levels, you know, he's a very clever young man, and he had chosen to do all 3 sciences and maths. But at that time for him, those A-level courses weren't gelling, they weren't working. And I remember having a conversation with him where I actually said to him, you know, do you want to drop out? Do you want to go off and get a job and earn some money and find yourself, and maybe revisit this later, because you don't need to do it now, and if it's not working and you're not getting good grades, you're kind of wasting your time and everyone else's. So I hope he doesn't mind me sharing all this, I'm sure he won't. He dropped out of A-levels. He went off to Northbrook and he did music production and theatre and had a brilliant time, and worked in lots of different jobs before he found that he really enjoyed finance and accountancy, which is what he's now doing. And he's now studying alongside work, and that is good for him. So I think it's not a one size fits all. I think you need to find your own path.
I completely agree, and I think what's interesting with that there is that actually ultimately it's just, for me, and certainly with my kids, it's finding what they enjoy. Finding your passion, that's always a difficult one. So how do you but do things that you enjoy doing, right? That's, for me, of the utmost importance. And the education system is set in a certain way that the academic side of education is that's what's rewarded. Right. Whereas there is the other side that potentially not as much so, and the creativity within the education system, and it isn't one size fits all. That's how listening to you talk, and that's it. And ultimately, I think now, you mentioned with our generation coming out and and having a degree isn't a ticket to a job if you don't necessarily know it. Of course, it helps to a certain level, especially if you want to get into law or medicine or a profession like that. Then, of course, you need that. My wife we went to school together, wanted to be a solicitor. That was her goal, and she's done that, and she's been a solicitor all her life. That was her dream, and she's achieved that. But she was in the minority of the people that knew what they wanted to do. I'm 44 and still searching, right? So I think it's then back to the point of what do you enjoy doing, and then find the path. No,
I completely agree with you. And actually, I became really interested in education policy after I had the girls. And at one point in time, actually took them out of school to home educate them. It was around the time that there was that very popular TED talk that was all about creativity, and everyone listened to it. And all of our friends were thinking about alternative education for their kids, because the curriculum in our schools had become so narrow. And I thought, by that time we had the business and we could afford it. So I thought, what a wonderful opportunity to take them out of school and to home educate them, and to do all of the things with them that are now considered enrichment, like the art the drama, the sport, the trips to museums and the art galleries, and they were doing martial arts and pottery and all of these wonderful things. And we had, a good year of the most tremendous fun, a lot of time in the forest school, building fires, foraging, fantastic.
What an amazing experience for them.
Yeah.
That's so incredible. And I love hearing things like that, because that's exactly it. I think I've often talked on it, like got twins, so there's obviously going to be a comparison. They're the same age and they go to school, but Sienna is really academic like Kelly, and she, like my wife, and she follows that, and whereas Lucy is a little bit more creative, we say, and again, forest school and stuff like that, really loves it. But the school identified, Lucy's a little bit behind, and I'll go mad about it, but I was really frustrated by that comment. I'm like, 7 years old, this was last 7 years old, how can she be behind? Behind what? Like, because they're being measured on a certain element of being, whereas experiences like that, life experiences, and they're so much more valuable than, for me, I think, than just that academic side. I know they've got to have foundations, but there's so much more value in that.
I completely agree. The ability to form relationships and solve problems, the ability to collaborate. There are so many skills that are so much more valuable in the world today than just having a piece of paper that says you're clever.
Yeah.
Because, as you say, it's an arbitrary measure, particularly when they're very young. And I think to pigeonhole them when they're young is also quite an unhelpful thing to do. So
I guess they're almost labelled as failures from like, because you don't fit into that box there, and you're not up to that measure. Like you said, there's that one measurement that they're put into that bracket of, and that could be quite damaging for someone quite young to be able to go, I'm not as clever as that person, or I'm not, and that just frustrates. I mean, what frustrates me is I can't understand why still, because everyone I talk to about this on here, why the system isn't changing, or why it doesn't change, because it's still so archaic, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, schools are very much the same as they were when we went to school, and the same as 100 years ago. We really haven't changed very much at all. And in all of my research, I found some wonderful examples of schools in other parts of the world where things are really done very differently. And hopefully one day we'll catch up. Yeah.
I hope so. Well, look, talk to me about that, like, I guess that early part of your career then, and getting into law at that early stage. Talk to me a little bit about that period, and obviously still being a young parent as well, and then doing that.
I mean, I was very, very lucky to find a training contract in Brighton, because they're difficult to get, as you'll know from your wife's experiences, no doubt.
Yes.
It's a competitive world. And I got a training contract in Brighton, and, was still, as you say, a young mum. But it was a great time. I found out that I loved work. I'd obviously struggled financially when I was, very young and caring for a child, and to be, fully financially independent and earning money and doing a job that I enjoyed, where my skills were valued, was hugely rewarding. And I was, incredibly happy. And I quite quickly discovered that employment law was, the area where I wanted to specialise, because I'm very interested in people and in work and in the world of work and how to make that better for people. I really enjoyed all of the tribunal work, representing people who had been unfairly dismissed or subjected to some form of discrimination, so working with equality. But also I really enjoyed training employers and helping employers to be the best they could be in terms of both working within the law but best practice as well. And I really found my niche there. I think if I hadn't had a young child at home, I would have loved to have gone off and been a human rights barrister or something like that. But that doesn't fit in with family life, so I needed to compromise a bit. And I was trained by the most brilliant woman, fantastic woman, so very lucky to have met her as well.
Key, you mentioned about obviously decisions being made based obviously around family as well from such a young age, and I always talk and maybe go into it a little bit later on about work-life balance and what that sort of looks like, but you've had to, I guess, navigate that from a really, really young age, whether it be studying for A-levels. Yeah. How have you managed that, I guess, through them early stages? What did you learn from those early stages, and how did that help you later on, I guess, to achieve a work-life balance of some kind?
I think that's a really difficult question for me to answer because, as you've just said, I've always done it. So I've been a parent my entire adult life. I was pregnant before I left home, and I've always had to combine work with family, apart from the few years when the girls were young and I was lucky enough to be a full-time stay-at-home mum, which I absolutely loved. But it's something that I've just always done, so I couldn't really say how. There is always a way to make it work. There's always a way to make it work. It means that life is very full and very busy, but, I love that. So
that's really interesting, yeah, because it's one of them, I guess, one of them things, especially as business owners and stuff like you, entrepreneurs, you constantly juggling and spinning plates and doing all them things, but being able to, I guess the key is trying to be present at any time. That's what I've certainly, I guess, learned from doing nearly 100 episodes of the podcast and speaking to people, trying to work out how people navigate the challenges that we face with family life and with work. But I guess it's my main thing is how do you become present in that moment? How important is that time, especially when, like you say, you're going through so many changes emotionally as a young person as well for you? Like, was that a challenge or?
Well, yes, absolutely. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there in terms of being present in the moment. And I think that's become both easier and more difficult with technology and the way that technology has changed. When I had Leon, there was no internet. So when I was studying, I was very focused on my books, but then when I put them away and I was with my baby, I was with him. Whereas now we have phones and we have the internet and we have laptops. We can work from home and we can work flexibly, which is brilliant in some ways for family life and for equality, particularly for women. But it also means that you never switch off from work. It's always there, it's ever present, and it interrupts us. And you can think you're with your kids because you're in the park, but if they're playing and you're on your phone, as you say, you're not really present with them in that moment. And I think entrepreneurs in particular and business owners are workaholics, most of us, by nature, and it becomes very difficult to switch off. And I think I've had to learn how to be very boundaried with my time and say, okay, I'm with my kids now, I'm at home, I'm being mum, put the phone away, leave it in another room, switch it off, so it's not distracting me from what they need.
And are you able to switch off when you do that?
I can now, but that's a new skill. That's a very new skill. For many years I couldn't. And in fact, for many years the business was in a position where it needed my full attention. And my parenting no doubt did suffer at that time. But, I felt that I didn't have much choice. Yeah.
I guess for me, one of the things trying to learn is actually getting that balance is tough. And I guess there's sometimes I'll be more present with the kids and other days I'm not. Ultimately, I try not to beat myself up too much about it, and I'm just trying to do the best I can on that given day. Like you said, sometimes the business will need you a lot more than it does on other days, and I guess trying to do the best we can as parents is, and as within work and everything else, that's where the balance is. Have I done my best today to try and be the best person I can? I've made decisions based on that. That's okay, right?
Absolutely, and also sometimes you don't do your best, and that's also okay, because actually we're all human and we make mistakes, and I know that I've made hundreds of mistakes, but you have to forgive yourself, and you do learn from those mistakes, and you do grow as a person. And if we spend too much of our time beating ourselves up and regretting decisions and replaying things in our minds, then that's really not helpful either. That doesn't help anyone. So I was such a perfectionist growing up. I had to, straight A student. I had to be the best. I had to be good at everything. And I've really had to learn to let a lot of that go and accept the fact that I'm not perfect, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And where does that perfectionism, where does that come from? Like, from that, was there much competition with your brother, or was it your peers, or where was that sort of, where did that come
There
from?
wasn't so much competition with my brother because he was nearly 3 years younger than me, and we were very, very different people. Yeah. In fact, he was just better at me, I think, with most things. But I think I'm competitive with myself. And I think it was, when I became pregnant, and it became like a survival mechanism for me to do well and to be the best. I set myself a goal of getting straight A's for my A-levels when I was pregnant. I decided that's what I was going to do. That's how I was going to survive in a way. And I went out and I did it. And I continued being like that for a number of years, and then I found that it was exhausting. And, you don't have to be the best, and you don't have to get straight A's. The most important thing is to be happy and to have balance in your life and good relationships and make positive decisions, and those things are actually much more important.
Okay, I'm just going to say something about one of our sponsors, Riverval. The world of cars, vans and minibuses is often a pain point for many of us. The hassle of finding the right vehicle, let alone looking after it, are all more things to add to our lists as busy people. Riverval's mission is to make motoring manageable, and that's why they provide leasing, purchasing, servicing and vehicle management. So whether you have one family car or a fleet of vans for your business, Riverval are your trusted vehicle supplier. Visit www.riverval.co.uk. Okay, let's jump back to the podcast. Was there a point that did something happen along the journey that made you change your mind around that?
Around the perfectionism?
Yeah, like when you decided that I don't have to be the best at that, or I can. Happiness and fulfillment comes from balance and those things. Was there a point that you can look at and go, that was when that changed? Or
yeah, so when I was 18, my son's dad killed himself, and that was obviously, that had a huge impact on me. And up until that point in time, I had really believed that if you work hard and you're a good person and you do the right things, then, you will be rewarded by life and good things will happen. And in my head, I for some reason, as I said, had hooked onto this idea that if I stayed at college and did my A-levels, then everything would be okay. And I got my results in August. I found out that I got 3 A's, and not only that, I got the top mark nationally in psychology A-level. And then in October, he died. And I realised that wasn't right. And I don't know why I ever thought it was right. But from that moment onwards, I realised that people and relationships and being happy is so much more important than working hard and doing well.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. Would you mind talking a little bit about that period, with him?
No, he took his own life. He gassed himself in my car. Leon at that time was 16 months old. I remember waking up in the morning in an empty bed and getting up and starting my morning routine, feeding Leon his porridge or his Weetabix, I think I gave him for breakfast, and then hearing a knock at the door. And I could see through the glass of the door that there were police officers on the other side. I could see their uniforms through the glass. And they came into the house and they said, we're very sorry, but we found a body and we think it's your partner, we think it's your boyfriend, and will you come to the morgue, to the hospital with us to identify the body? Which I did, and it is one of those formative memories that will never leave me. I was hugely shocked, hugely traumatised, and went through a period of the most intense grief and pain. But as I came out the other side, I don't know, I found a new sense of confidence that I hadn't had before. When you've been through the worst that you could go through and survive, you come out stronger. And I know that's a cliche, everybody says that, but it really is true. And suddenly nothing felt difficult anymore, because, I could go to a job interview and that was nothing compared to what I'd been through and what I'd survived. So,
Jo, thank you for sharing that with us, and paints a picture, I guess, like listening to put in context when you talk about the business, and we'll go on to that a little bit later, and where that resilience and strength comes from, and understanding a little bit more about your story now, and sharing that. I guess, like you said, those challenges, not insignificant because they're still challenges, but less so than what you've already been through.
Yeah, and I think it's really important sometimes in life to reflect on who you are and where you've come from. And we can, as much as it's good to live in the moment, we can also get caught up in the moment. And occasionally taking time to step back and reflect on what we have done and what we have achieved and the journey we've been on to get to where we are today can be quite valuable and quite helpful.
Yeah, very much so. And I guess, like, I'm really keen at that point. It still was such a young age, 18, to find that. Where did you found that strength and resilience from at that young age?
I don't know that I was strong and resilient necessarily, and I remember at the time so many people kept saying, "You're so brave." And I thought, I'm not brave, because bravery is a choice, and I didn't choose this. It's happened, and I'm just getting on with life, because what else can I do? I'm a mum, I have a baby, I can't stop, I can't go off the rails, because I have another person who's dependent on me. I have to be okay for him. And that's why, and that's how I kept going. So I guess really, in answer to your question, the strength and the resilience came from the fact that I was a mum and I had a little boy to look after.
Amazing. I guess if we're to move on there and look at, I guess, the start of from that, looking at some of those skills that, like I said, it will put into context about the conversation we're having now about I guess the business and that next part of your journey, I guess, leading up to that. But talk to me, I guess, about 2012. What the from a solicitor to director of Bagelman. How does that come about?
So it was 2011 that we bought the business. I was pregnant with my third child, Maddie, my second daughter, and still working, as you say, as an employment law solicitor, but about to go on maternity leave. And at that time, my husband was at a crossroads in his career, and we decided that we would buy a business for him to run. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mum, so take a short career break to be at home with my babies. I was about to have 2 under 2, so a lot of work, and then a 16-year-old boy at home as well. And he found Bagelman. Bagelman was on the market, and he said, "Look, this is brilliant. This is just a fantastic business. I can run this well. It fits my skill set, and what a wonderful brand." It was a brand that we already knew that whole time I was at university, I lived on Bagelman bagels. I loved them. It started up at the Innovation Centre at Sussex University and grew from there. So it was, a brand and a product that we both had a lot of familiarity with. And so we did it. We went for it. We bought the business. I did the HR sporadically. I also did work for other employers as well, but predominantly for the next few years I was a stay-at-home mum, which I loved. And it was a huge privilege. What a privilege to be able to do that and spend those years at home with your baby. So I was very lucky.
Yeah, sure. And then so he's running a business, but then moving on to 2008, you come into the business more as managing director. Talk to me about that decision.
So fast forward to 2018, that was actually the year that I was homeschooling the kids. Unfortunately, that was also the year that my marriage broke down. So my husband and I very sadly separated. So there was a lot of grief around the loss of that relationship. We'd been together for 20 years. And I was readjusting again to the fact that I was a single mum for the second time in my life, with a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old still at home. My son Leon had obviously grown up and left home by then and was doing his own thing. And so coping with that new reality, I went into one of the shops one day because I hadn't really been involved in the business very much at all. And I just thought there's something not quite right. I couldn't put my finger on what it was, but there was something not quite right. So I went to the managing director and I said to her, now that I'm separating from my husband, your boss, I'd like to be more involved. Is there anything I can do to help? And she said, actually, yes, you could do the weekly one-to-ones that I have with the store managers. That would really help me. So that's what I started doing. And then a few weeks in, I looked again at the shop in Hove and I thought, actually, we've had it refurbished fairly recently, but it could do with a bit more, a few finishing touches, a bit of art, maybe some new lighting, maybe some plants. So I said, can I have a small budget, just to sort of do the finishing touches? And she said it was at that moment that for her the penny dropped and she realised that I had no idea what was really going on. So she called me into a meeting and she said, Jo, I'm really sorry, but you're about to lose everything. The business is losing money and I've tried everything and nothing has worked and I need you to take over. And it was a huge shock. I just lost my marriage, but I thought that we were financially stable. And then to discover that was not the case was huge. And then on top of that, I was being asked to take on this business. And I've never run a business before. I knew nothing about running a food business. I at one time thought I might set up a law firm, but that's entirely different to baking bread and serving food. And there's the health and safety, the trading standards, there is so much that goes into running a business, as you'll know yourself, understanding profit and loss and managing a cash flow and supplier contracts. The list is endless. And I was so scared. But also, for a long time I said I had no choice, but of course I did have a choice. I could have said no. But saying no meant losing everything, and saying yes meant maybe saving everything. So I said yes, and I took over, and I did my best to make things work, and I did make things work. The business is, still here and it's thriving and it's growing and it's brilliant, but it has been a very difficult 5 years to get to where we are today.
Wow. I mean, what even, where'd you start? What goes through your head at that point of that conversation, your mindset at when someone says that to you, that you could lose everything unless you come in and jump in and make a go of it? Where do you even start to? What do you do day one when you go? Well, I've made that decision. I am going to go and do it. what was your plan then? Where do you start?
I looked at the numbers. That's the very first thing I did. We had a finance manager and she was producing monthly management information, and we had a finance meeting, and I mean that was probably the biggest shock, because up until that point I didn't know quite how bad things were. And when I looked at the numbers, I took a step back, and actually I think I have my dad to thank for this. His scientific brain is very good at boiling down big complex problems into something quite simple. And I thought, okay, what is a business in its simplest form? What do you need to make sure you survive? And you need to make sure that the money coming in is greater than the money going out. So how do I do that with this business now? We've got a great product. People love the product. The shops are busy. There's not much I can do, I don't think, to improve sales, at least not quickly and not with the type of business that we're running. So what can I do? Well, I can, try to save money by cutting costs. So I set about renegotiating supplier contracts, rent, changing our packaging, making redundancies, which was really hard and really sad and difficult, because some people had worked for us for a long time and worked hard for us. But I just looked at all of the different ways in which I could save money. And gradually, bit by bit, I found that we started to move back into profitability. There also needed to be some really big changes. There was one shop in particular where the rent was really high and we had to close that shop. But it meant that the remaining business would be profitable. And so I just took it one day at a time, and I chipped away and I chipped away, and eventually we were profitable again. We still had debt, which needed to be managed, and we used a legal mechanism for managing that debt with the help of some insolvency practitioners. But, we got there. And actually, in a relatively short period of time, the business was thriving. It was doing well. It was making a good profit. And we were climbing our way out of that big black hole that we'd been in.
Wow. Well, again, like I said at the start, I guess one of the reasons I was so excited to have you on, because I remember listening to you talk about that at the best of prayer. I just was blown away, really, just thinking about looking at your business and being in that hole, and what the steps actually, people listening as well, potentially some of them maybe in a position similar, and looking at those things. And I guess a couple of things to urge is that people, we always got a choice, right, as you sort of mentioned, but if you are going to give it a go, then look at some of them key elements. Where can you save? What can you do? How do you, those practical solutions to be able to, because sometimes it is looking at it logically, taking the emotion away from it, because that for you, I guess, must have been a difficult thing as well from an emotional side, because you're obviously dealing with, splitting up with your husband as well. Because his involvement in the business, what was that then at that point? And was he involved still then, or?
He agreed to step aside when I came in to take over. So he had been CEO with a managing director. And at the point in time she came to me and asked me to take over, he agreed that he would step aside and let me take over. So he obviously hadn't shared any of that in the business was going down, or was he not aware of that, or? I couldn't say.
So, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
Wow. But I guess a couple of things. One, back to, from your point of view, I guess, from back to that point of what you've been through at just 18, to look at a challenge smack in the face as you are now, as you was with Bagelman, looking at it in the sense that actually can't be as bad as what I've been through previously. We're going to give this a go and come out of that. Would that be right?
I think it would be right in a way, but also I had absolutely no idea what I was taking on. I'd had no idea until I started. I was uncovering things as I went along day by day. and the the reality of this situation was slowly revealing itself to me. And from an emotional perspective, I think in a way it was easier for me to come in and be the saviour than it can be for directors for whom things have gone wrong on their watch. And quite often it isn't anybody's fault. The market can change. One of your most important clients can go bust, and that can have an impact on you. There could be a pandemic. There are so many things that are not our fault, that are outside our control, that can have an impact, a financial impact on our business. But it's definitely easier to come in and save the day than it is to be the person who's, feeling responsible and trying to pick up the pieces. When I did did a bit of research before I did that talk that you listened to, and one of the things I found out was that when things start to go wrong, the vast majority of company directors will do nothing and hope things might get better. And I think one of the things I said in that talk was how important it is not to do that and to act quickly, and to, as difficult and painful as it might be, to recognise what's going on, to take action, and to go and find some professional advice, because there are people out there who can help you and are qualified to help you. And even very early on, there are all sorts of business rescue packages that can be put in place. And quite often your creditors, it's in their interests for your business to survive as well, because they're quite often your suppliers and they make good money from you. So everybody has an interest in seeing a good business survive that's in some sort of temporary difficulty, which is, what happened to us.
Was there, as you started to uncover things, I guess seeing more and more challenges as you did unravel stuff, was there ever a point where you felt like you looked at it and you just went, I'm not going to continue with this, I can't continue? Was that ever in your mindset, or was it always, I'm going to get through, we'll just take each day that comes, I'm going to get through?
There were lots of times when I wanted to give up and walk away, but it's a little bit like waiting for a bus. The longer you're there, the more you've invested of yourself, the more difficult it can be to walk away. And I'm so stubborn, I'm inherently stubborn and determined, and I don't give up easily. So no, I did just keep going.
And then, and you still remember the point where, like you said, that where you saw that, I guess, I believe, I'm guessing, at the beginning, there's not much of a light at the end of that tunnel. But do you remember that point where you sort of, as you're going along and you saw that and you was like, I could see that flicker in the end?
Yeah, I mean, it did come actually relatively quickly, because I took over in October with my team. I really need to stress, with my team. It wasn't me alone. I had brilliant people working with me. We turned the business, turned the ship around. And once we'd proven that it was profitable again at its core, we could then put it into a CVA, and that meant we had a way to manage the debt. And that was by March, end of March. I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. The CVA was going to be for 3 years. I could see that it was affordable. The business was working well. And, that was March 2019. I thought we just need to keep things going now. So that light came quite quickly. Obviously, that changed a year later when we went into the pandemic. But at that point in time, I thought, job done. Yeah.
Let's then talk about the pandemic. I mean, again, you've split up with your husband. You've been given that the business, which is struggling. You've come in to turn it around, which you've done fairly quickly. And then March 2020, bang, and the pandemic hits. What goes through your mind at that point?
Yeah, I mean, that was huge. And, we had been through so much trauma already, not just as a business, but as a family. Me and the kids had to leave our home and move above one of the shops, and that was one of the cost-saving measures I put in place. I massively reduced my salary, the money that was coming out of the business for me, and I did that by moving the family from, you know, a beautiful Sussex village right into the centre of Brighton. And so, you know, turning the business around came at huge personal cost. There was a lot of sacrifice, a lot of long hours, you know, in the early stages, 50, 60-hour weeks, earning not a lot of money, but just in the hope that I would end up with an asset that you know, was worth saving. So having gone through all of that, the day that lockdown was announced, which was my birthday, was hugely, hugely traumatizing. And I spent a whole day crying. I woke up in the morning and I cried all day. But by the end of the day, I felt amazing. I felt a huge sense of relief because I'd let go. I'd thought to myself, okay, I did everything I could. We're in a lockdown, a government-imposed lockdown, because there's a global pandemic. There is just no way we can survive this. And it was tremendously sad. But as I say, at the end, by the end of the day, I'd let go of it all, and I felt light as a feather. I felt okay. I thought, okay, what's next? But the strangest thing about that is, you know, I went to bed, I got up the next day, and I carried on, and the business carried on, and we got through the pandemic. And, you know, it was hard work, but we did it. We survived. And at that point in time in March, I never thought that would be possible.
This is Geo. Geo runs a scarf company. Geo doesn't see the need for telecoms. Everybody uses mobiles now. But can a mobile really be a business phone? Geo is having coffee with a client, Gabby. Well, actually, Geo prefers acacia leaf tea. But what happens when someone calls? It could be a big new deal. Surely it would be rude to take the call? But many people hate leaving messages. They may just call a competitor instead. What can Geo do? The answer is simple. Turn the mobile into a business phone. With the Go Giraffe app, Geo can quickly transfer the call. Or, before the meeting, Geo can simply use the app to divert calls. No more missed calls, lost deals, or unhappy customers. Turn your mobile into a business phone today. Go Giraffe.
Getting back to that mindset, what is it about you that you go? I spoke to someone on there a couple of times, and they said, as a business owner, basically, if I get punched in the face 3 times a day, I'm having a good day. So we have to, that resilience and stuff is built. But you've talked about a variety of traumatic experiences in your life that many of us won't have ever faced, and yet, is it that makes you get up the next day and go, I'm just going to carry on?
I think it does give you a strength and a resilience. Yes, I think it can make you stronger. I think trauma can make you stronger. I don't know. I don't know whether there is anything particularly different about me. I think maybe I'm just incredibly stubborn. Yeah.
I mean, and it's incredible and then getting through, I guess, through lockdown and coming out that other side, and where the business is today, and where you've gone to, and obviously you've obviously changed as well now coming out of that side of it. So just talk to me about, I guess, that moment of, I guess, was it of relief that you go, I've got the business to this stage now, and it has turned a corner?
Yeah, I mean, we went through many other issues and problems that needed to be overcome. You know, we didn't come out of the pandemic completely unscathed. And there were other challenges, and we needed to bring in new investment in order to survive. And I was really lucky to have a very dear friend who believed in me, had been a part of my journey and wanted to invest. So we brought in new investment, and that was what enabled the business to keep going and keep on. And so, yeah.
we've talked about all these challenges. Was there that sense of, like, where was that point where you come out of the pandemic and there again another light at the end of the tunnel, or that sense of we have turned this business around now, and a euphoric moment, or just a point where you get to a point where you go, oh, we're on the right track now, I'm okay?
Yeah, I always thought that there would be a euphoric moment, and my son and I called that Champagne Day, and we would say to each other, when's Champagne Day? Is it now? Is it now? Is it now? Is it this moment or this moment? And we've had so many days that could be Champagne Day, and we keep saying to each other, not yet, not yet, not yet. It's not Champagne Day yet. But yeah, I mean, the business is in a really brilliant position now. It is growing. We opened a new shop last year. We're going to be opening another new shop very soon. Which is the one for some reason I'm most excited about. It's in a shipping container behind Aldi.
Wow.
Yeah, it's in a really cool part of town near the Met College that's being developed. Loads of student accommodation going in. There's a really cool gym next door. And so we're in a period of growth, and the business has been completely reinvented. I changed the brand design, I changed the menu boards, the way the pricing is structured, and it is, it's in a fantastic position. But it was never meant for me, that business. I never had an ambition, as I said earlier, to run a business. I always loved my career in employment law and by extension HR, which is the field that I'm now working in. And it felt like a really sensible time to hand over to my son, because he has all of the skills. He was 16 when we bought the business. He's done every job in it. He knows it better than anyone. He's done hundreds of hours in the bakery, behind the counter, from 16 until today. He's scrubbed the floors, he's painted the walls, he's done everything. And because he now works in finance, he's got all of those skills, so he can do payroll and manage cash flow and create management information. And so he's brilliant. He's the perfect person now to take it forward into the future.
Is he coming the CEO then?
I just think in a small business you don't need a CEO. He's the MD, and I no longer have any management responsibility at all, and I am absolutely delighted about that. I cannot tell you, but I love it, and I'm still there in the background. If he needs some advice, I'm there to lend an ear and to help him steer things in the right direction. But also just tremendously happy to be working as an HR consultant and looking after my girls. That's me. That's who I am, really. So, yeah.
What an incredible! With Leon taking over that role, I guess. Was it his ambition to want to run a business at some point, or is it that just sort of developed into this opportunity that he sees and just?
He loves the business. Really? He really loves it. It was a part of his childhood, a part of his growing up, and he's got such a passion for it and a passion for the brand and for wanting to keep it in the family and grow it and love it and nurture it, which is what a business like that needs. So I don't know whether he always intended to or had ambitions to one day run it. He's a brilliant accountant and, a brilliant finance manager.
So is that what he done after Scott? Like he studied to
he has another full-time job working as a finance manager, and he's training to be an accountant, but also has the business as well. But it is a family business in its truest sense, because his girlfriend also works for us. She does all of our social media and a lot of business support for the managers. Her dad drives the van. We've over the years employed so many different friends and family members and friends' children. And that's wonderful. Everybody says it, but a small business like that is a family. And we are just enormously lucky to have such a brilliant workforce, so many good managers and loyal workers who, will often leave and come back. One of our bakers has worked with us on and off since he was 17, and he's just a little bit older than Leon. And I think that, reflects really well on us as people and as employers.
Yeah, amazing. doing the HR consultancy now, would you ever want to do another business?
No. No.
I would have guessed that might have been. But like, I'm keen as well, just to. Cause I always talk about, go on to success in a little while, but prior to that, failures and struggles and stuff that we do face. What's your like you say, you're very stubborn. What's your relationship like with failure?
That's a very good question. And if it was a question about mistakes, I could tell you about hundreds of thousands of mistakes that I've made. But failure is something a bit different to that. And I talked a lot about my perfectionism, and part of that meant that I would never do anything I wasn't good at because I wouldn't want to fail. But my relationship with failure has obviously evolved and changed over the years, and I've had to really face it head on. There were many moments in time when the business could have failed but didn't, and many moments in time when I personally felt like a failure, that I was making, mistakes and getting things wrong, and it was just such a huge mountain I had to climb, and I was learning every day, so of course I was making mistakes. The failure that I cherished the most, I did think about this. I did once apply for a job with a government agency, a very secret government agency, and they rejected me. And looking back, I'm absolutely delighted that they rejected me, because I would have hated that job. It would have been very difficult, a lot of pressure, far too much responsibility. So, sometimes you put yourself out there and you fail and you get rejected, but you learn and you grow.
I think that's for me, failed many times, and I do most days, I guess, but it's the stuff that we learn from, like you mentioned, even about mistakes. They are slightly different maybe from failures, but actually whatever we do in life, we trip over and we get back up again and we keep going. That's where we learn, right? That's where we learn those, what we're made of and how we can deal with those processes, and then hopefully learn from those mistakes, failures, or whatever they are, and try and develop them in a different way for the next thing that comes along. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important to put yourself out there, and to try new things. And I always worry a lot about what people think of me. And I think that's one of my greatest lessons over the last few years, is to really let go of that. Whenever you take on any kind of leadership role, you have to make really difficult decisions, and you have to make decisions that some people will love and some people will hate, and not everyone will like you. And no one will know actually what information you have presented to you. No one really knows what has caused you to reach that decision. So you need to be really strong in yourself, and have a real sense of your own morality and your own integrity, and be confident that under scrutiny you can justify, at the very least to yourself, the decisions that you've made, and be comfortable with those decisions. And I lived in a bubble for years. I was a stay-at-home mum, and I didn't fail and I didn't make mistakes because I was in my bubble with my babies. And then suddenly I was out there in the world, in a position where I was making mistakes on a daily basis, and having to really come to terms with that and how that felt. But a huge period of growth, as you say, huge growth.
If I, looking back over all of what we've discussed, if you could go back to a specific moment in your journey and change it, what would it be?
So, I don't believe in regrets, but there was a moment in my life when I had a huge opportunity which I walked away from, and that was after I did my A-levels, and I got the top mark nationally for psychology A-level. I sat my exam with the Oxford and Cambridge exam board, and I received a prize from Oxford University, an all expenses paid trip to the British Psychological Society convention that year, which was in Manchester, and I didn't go. But also I was told, if you want to go and study at Oxford or Cambridge, the top universities in the country, you can with these results. This is phenomenal. And I didn't. And if I could go back in time and change anything, I think I would have done that. I would have left Brighton and I would have gone and pursued a career perhaps as a psychologist. On the other hand, I wouldn't have my kids. So how could I swap them for that? And how could I possibly know what might have happened if I'd taken that different path? So, you know.
And I'm always, I always find that so fascinating, that question, but I always am a believer that ultimately we make the best decision where we are at that time. And that's all we can do in life, isn't it?
Yeah, and I completely agree with you, and I think I said that myself as well earlier. You make the best decision at that time, and you look back with hindsight and you think maybe I should have done something differently, but you didn't have all of the information and you didn't know what was going to happen next. You know, when I took on the business, I didn't know there was going to be a pandemic. You know, how could I possibly have foreseen that? And yet, you know, what I've ended up with is a fantastic, thriving business. My kids are happy. I'm back in the career that, you know, that I love. My son's now got this fantastic opportunity to take the business forward. And actually, it was probably, despite the pain, the best decision I could have made. So, yeah.
And actually, through the struggles that we face in life, life is a struggle, and that's it. And it's, but again, back to the point of, it's how we react to those things that are forced upon us, and whether it be trauma or whatever those struggles, life is a struggle. But as long as you keep moving forward and you keep believing, and things will be okay.
Yeah, keep going. Keep going, absolutely. There were times when I nearly didn't, but I'm very glad that I did. So, yeah.
Amazing. Joe, as I knew it would, it's been such a fascinating conversation, and we're coming just towards the end of our life in 60 seconds, and we, again, talking about success and how that's defined, where you've been and where you are, where you're going. What's your definition of success?
Success has to be about happiness. It really has to be about happiness. You know, you can talk about having a successful business, which is a business that makes money or achieves its purpose, whether that's, you know, providing a good service or creating a good product. But if you're not happy, you're not successful. So my own happiness, but also the happiness of my children, my friends, my family, and also a feeling that I'm making a positive impact on the world. That to me is success and a successful life.
Love that. And I think, look, I can honestly say, just from having this conversation and by you sharing so much and being so open and honest with us, that you are certainly having an impact and inspiring so many people, I guess, out there. Me certainly, and I'm sure many of our listeners, with your amazing story. And I'm really, really grateful for your time and coming on and sharing that with us.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for having me. It's been a huge honour, great privilege. Thank you.
It's been amazing. Before we go, what does the future hold for you?
Oh, a simple life. A really simple life. I'm just going to keep raising my kids and doing my job and doing the things that I love, like running and meditation and yoga and yeah, hopefully no more big challenges, although I'm sure there will be some.
There will be, I'm sure. Meditation, I'm keen to just touch on that. I've started this year a little bit. Do you meditate every day?
I would like to.
Yeah.
You know, soon into my Bagelman journey, one of my dearest, oldest friends invited me to go on a retreat with her, with an incredible teacher called Bergs, and he helped me loads just in 1 week. I spent a week not speaking to anyone. It was a silent retreat and meditating all day, every day. And by the time I left, I felt like I was floating. I felt light and I felt able to think clearly and make really, really good decisions. So I would, you know, highly recommend any form of prayer or meditation or, you know, just taking some quiet moments in the day to anyone. I think it's an amazing thing, a powerful thing.
I love that. like I said, I've just started, like this year, I've tried to delve into it, so much so the last couple of months, been to the Buddhist centre a couple of times and just done some guided meditation there, and it's game changing.
It is
really
absolutely brilliant, and I think it's to do with just making your mind still and then developing your concentration. There was one thing that Berg said to me on the first day which really resonated with me, which is to do with suffering. And he said, "Are you okay?" And my brain said, "No, I'm not okay. All of these terrible things have happened to me, and I'm really worried about all these things in the future that might happen." And he said, "But are you okay now, in this moment? Are you okay?" And the honest answer to that question is yes. I have food, I have shelter, I have companionship. I'm sitting in a room meditating with some really fantastic people. In this moment, I am okay. And that means that all of my pain and my suffering is coming from remembering things that have happened and therefore no longer matter, or worrying about things in the future that haven't yet happened and may never happen and therefore don't matter. And it comes back to that idea of just being present in the moment.
Love that. What an amazing way to round up. That was Joe. I can't wait to share this episode. So listen, again, thank you so much. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. And that, as they say, is a wrap.